Attention, all passengers. Special announcement. New destinations have been announced. Please be advised and plan accordingly. All aboard.
Hello, greetings and good evening to everyone. And I welcome all of you, one and all present here, for the Flutter Festival by GDSC VIT Bhopal. I am Mishika Kulkarni, the lead at GDSC VIT Bhopal, and with me I have Aman, the technical lead, who is also the Flutter
Hey.
facilitator for this event. So, Aman, would you like to begin with Flutter Festival?
Yeah, sure. I'm very excited for it. So let's start with it. Yeah.
Yes. Um, so now let us discuss what Flutter Festival is. So basically, Flutter Festival is a community platform where all of us are there, and we'll be discussing the fundamentals of Flutter. And now Flutter is a programming language, and we'll just start with screen sharing, and then we can begin with the presentation.
Yeah.
Great. So we'll begin with Flutter Festival now. Today we will be discussing about introduction to Dart, introduction to Flutter, and of course we'll be discussing about Dartpad as well as Flutter. So Dartpad is where you can start learning Flutter and start coding Flutter. So let's begin with a brief introduction about Flutter Festival. So what is Flutter Festival? Flutter Festival is a community-led event series where developers can join to learn the fundamentals of Google technologies featuring Flutter, Firebase, and of course Google Cloud. So we will be hosting them from 25th to 30th of March. And Flutter Festival will be a 5 day long boot camp, and we assure you guys that it would be a fun learning experience. And you will all be receiving certificates if you attend all the 5 sessions. We will be circulating a Google form at the end of the session where you can mark your attendance. And of course, don't forget to register up for tomorrow's session, and the link for the same will be given in the chat. Now, for today's session, we will be going light with a little bit of basics as to what Flutter is and the agenda. And the agenda is basically introduction of Flutter and Dart, as mentioned earlier. And we would be coding this on Dartpad, thus you won't be requiring any additional software for the same. So now let's move on. The video you saw, that was basically Dash. So before diving into Flutter, I would like to introduce you all to Dash. So Dash is the official mascot of Flutter and Dart. So why choose a circular hummingbird, you might ask? So now this circular, beautiful, cute round hummingbird represents that Dart and Dash is a speedy language basically. So Dart is the language used for Flutter. So the motivation behind having a hummingbird was because it is fast, and because Dash was also the code name for this Dart project. And again, it is gender neutral, and it seemed appropriate to have a hummingbird because hummingbirds are the fastest birds. And feel free to follow us, GDSC VIT Bhopal, as well as Dash on Instagram as well. And the link for the same is given in the chat box. So now let's begin with what is Flutter. We've been discussing about Dash, we've been discussing about Flutter, but what is Flutter really? So Flutter is an open source framework by Google for building beautiful, natively compiled multi-platform applications from a single code base. So basically, Flutter transforms the app development process. You can build, test, and deploy beautiful models on mobile, web, as well as desktop, and again, embedded apps as well in a single code base. Isn't that amazing? In simpler terms, you will be able to build apps and websites with the help of a single code. If you're new to either web development or app development, then Flutter is definitely for you because it would totally reduce the time, energy, and efforts that you put in a project. As mentioned in the slide, Google's portable UI toolkit for building beautiful multi platform applications is Flutter. now let us consider this image because this will sum it all. So let us assume that there is a simple task manager app that you've been working on. So you need to work on the web as well as an app for it. So a usual way would be to build a web application using HTML, CSS, and JavaScript and other thousands of libraries for making it a little easier for the user to use. And then after that, you will be making either an Android or an iOS app. So isn't that a little complicated, also time consuming? So when Flutter comes into play, you just have to make one single code, and it won't only be compatible for the web app or the application, but it will also be compatible to iOS, tablets, and all of your other devices. So basically, in short, Flutter is supported by iOS, Android, web, Windows, Mac OS, Linux, embedded systems, and everything else. Isn't that easy? So that is exactly why we choose to use Flutter. Now, a common question is that why learn another language, and how is this different from all of the other languages? Because we've seen Kotlin, we have seen HTML, we have seen JS. So why use Flutter? So basically, Dart, the language for Flutter, is, as we mentioned earlier, fast, and Dart is easy to comprehend. And as the slide says, everything is a widget. Flutter widgets are built using a modern framework that takes inspiration from React. The central idea is that you build your UI out of widgets. So widgets describe what the view should be looking like and given the current configuration and state. So we have text, rows, columns, stacks, and containers. Basically, everything that you make will be in this form. So it will be easier for you to handle components and obviously for them to change according to web view or the desktop view or applications or whatever you'll be using. Now, next, why do we use Flutter and what are the foundation pillars of Flutter? So Flutter is fast. So it is easy to compile your source code to your machine learning code. Other than that, Flutter is productive. So what does productive mean? It means that Flutter can develop while your app is running. You don't have to refresh your code base 50,000 times after you write one single line of code. It's going to do the work itself. And basically, this means that it reloads hot. So it increases your efficiency. Other than that, Flutter is beautiful. I mean, it has a beautiful UI as mentioned earlier. So you don't have to compromise your designs for the same. Open source is another reason why you should be using Flutter because you will be joining a global community of developers who will be there to readily help you. And again, Flutter is portable. I mean, if you need it on your GitHub, it's going to be there. If you need it on Visual Studio Code, it's going to be there. If you want to just work on cloud, you can work on Dartpad. So again, Flutter is portable and open source. So what else do you need? Next, we'll be talking about Dart. So I hope by now you have a basic idea as to what Flutter is and why we use it. So as mentioned earlier, Dart is the language used for Flutter. I would like to call up Aman to discuss Dart and get us along with the code. Over to you, Aman.
Yeah. So, hey guys, good evening. So today, yeah, Ishika gave a very good brief about what Flutter is and what Dart is. And so today we'll have a general hands-on session with Dart, and you'll get a basic gist of what Dart is. So to give you a very rough idea, Dart can be thought of as a baby between Java and Python. So the syntax is very much similar to Java, and just a few things are borrowed from the Python syntax. So it is very easy to learn. And for today, for the hands-on session, we will be using Dartpad, which is a web-based coding platform developed by engineers. And yeah, so you won't be needing any setup at all. You can just use Dartpad, and we're good to go. So I'll be sharing my screen now, and you guys can just go along with the walkthrough of the programming language. We won't be going very deep into it because, like, since we'll be using Flutter in the future sessions, you won't be using Dart a lot. Like most of the things are uh, abstracted when it comes to using Flutter. So we'll have a very basic overview of the programming language. I'll be sharing my screen now, so you guys can maybe code along. Just give me a second. Let me know if my screen is visible.
Yes, it's loading. It's visible.
All right, cool. So this is our Dartpad, which is, like I said, a web-based like programming environment. So you can run and compile and run your Dart code right from the browser itself. You won't be needing any setup. So like there's a basic code over here, and all you need to do to run it is just click on the run button and it will run. All right, so we'll go through the code now. Before we start doing anything, we'll just go through the same code itself. So the first thing that we see is that this particular code has a main function. So just like Java, uh, Dart also has an entry point within the code, and this entry point is the main function. So whatever you write within your main function is the thing that is going to get executed. So here, what we see is inside the main function, there's a for loop. This for loop again is very similar to how we define it in Java. There can be a few difference, like there can be a few differences in the syntax here and there, but it's mostly similar to Java, so you'll be able to catch it very easily. And if you're first time coders, like joining the session for the first time or coding for the first time, still Dart is very easy to pick up. I'll share some resources with you guys as well. Here I'm assuming that you have some experience with programming, but in case you're not very well versed with programming and this is maybe your first time coding, so I'll be sharing some resources with you at the end of the session, and you can go through those resources and maybe get better prepped up for tomorrow's session uh, where we'll be going through our first coding session where we'll be making our uh, mobile application. So yeah. All right, so within this main function, we have a for loop, and inside this for loop, we are printing something. So let's analyze what is going on inside this for loop. We are going from integer value 0 all the way up to integer value 5. And we are just printing hello and then I plus 1. So let's assume it starts from, let's see, it starts from 0. So the first thing that is going to print is 0 plus 1, which is 1. Then in the next loop, it is going to print 2, hello 3, hello 4, hello 5, all the way up to hello 5. So yeah, this was the initial code. Now, the first thing that we need to understand is that every programming language has some data types associated with it. Data types are basically uh, like you can say you're storing some kind of data, and that data has to represent something. That data can represent an integer, a float, a string. So yeah, let's take a look at what basic data types are available in Dart. You can obviously just Google it and you'll have a complete list of it, but the most commonly used data types, we'll be discussing them here today. So the first one is obviously integer, and all you need to define a variable is define its data type, then just give it a name. So for now, I'll be giving it int1, and it is going to, I'll have to assign it a value. For now, I'll assign it 5. And just like this, we have initialized our variable, which is of data type integer. They can be floating point values as well. So let's take a double. It's a floating point value, so I'll name it float1, and it'll be equal to 4.5. Now, one frustrating thing about Dart, since I'm a Python developer, is the semicolons. So if I miss semicolons here and there, just let me know. And yeah, then there's strings as well. Yeah, there can be more data types as well, but now for now we'll be using just these three. So let's be done with it. Okay, we might need bool as well, so let's see that too. You can name your variables anything. There are a few rules regarding variable naming. So I'll be sharing some documentations and some resources regarding what all naming conventions are there in Dart and other stuff. So you can go through those and you'll get a better understanding. So yeah, these are the basic data types that we'll be using. Now let's just print these. So for printing, all you need to do is just print and uh, like use a print function. And inside that, you need to define like specify what variable you want to print. All right, let's run this code and let's see what happens. All right, so our code compiled and it ran. The first value was printed. The first value that got printed was int1, that was equal to 5. Then 4.5, hello, and finally true. So this was a very basic overview of what all data types are there in Dart. Next thing that we are going to take a look at is loops. So we have already seen an example of loop, which was a for loop. So let's define one more loop. So this one is, let's say, going to print values from 10 all the way up to 1. So for, all right, before I move on, you don't always have to specify the data type in order to initialize a variable. In order to keep things dynamic, you can just do var and whatever data, like whatever variable name that you want to give, var1, and it can take any data type. So let's give it a data type of string, give it a value of a string, and it'll, like, Dart will automatically uh, understand what data type we are providing to the variable. So var is the keyword that you use when you don't necessarily have to like want to specify the data type, or you're not sure what data type is going to be assigned to that particular variable. So now we'll just print var1 and okay, semicolon. Like I said, it's very frustrating. Yeah, so it got printed. Easy. Next thing that, like I said, we're going to take a look at loops. So let's define a loop. Var I equals 10. It'll start from 10 and we'll print all the way up to 1. So I is greater than equal to 1. And we are going to decrement it by 1 at each step. So I minus minus. Now, we are just going to print the numbers. Yeah. As you can see, numbers got printed from all the way up to 10 to 1. So this is how a for loop works in Dart. Now, one more thing that I want to show you how you can use for loop in a different way is uh, the basic example, like I'll give you a basic syntax for object in, uh, let's say list, object in list, and then anything can go inside it. By the way, this is how we specify comments in Dart, just two forward slashes, or if it's a multi-line comment, then forward slash asterisk, and then you can specify multi-line comments, and finally forward slash again. So yeah, this is multi-line comments in Dart. Now let's go back to coding and let's see how we can use for loop in a different way. First of all, we are going to initialize a list. Now, list is another data type in Dart, and we can specify, we can initialize a list as like this, L1, and it is going to be equal to this, just a simple list. And now we are going to print all the values inside the list. So for I in L1, print, and we are going to print I. Um, yeah, as you can see, all the values inside the list got printed. Now there are other loops as well, like the while loop or the do while loop. So let's take a quick example of while loop as well. Let's initialize a variable var 5 var num equals 5, and we are going to print the values uh, till num reaches let's say -5. So while num is greater than equal to -5, we are going to print num, and at each step after each loop we are going to decrement num by 1. So num minus minus, and yeah, this should do the work. Let's print it. As you can see, we started from 5, then kept decrementing it until we reached -5. So this is how you use a while loop in Dart. Very basic example. This isn't something very complex and very easy to do. The next thing that we are going to
Aman,
do.
before
Yeah,
beginning, we have just a small question. So could you just answer it and then we can move on?
yeah,
So
sure.
Khush is asking, what is the data type var used for?
Okay, so when you're using var, you're not assuming any data type. You are basically telling that whatever data type that I'm going to provide to this variable, you just assign it to it. You don't have to specify, like when you are not like 100% sure what data type you're going to provide to the variable, just use var, which is the easiest one.
Amazing. I believe the query is resolved, so we can move on.
All right. So now let's move on to conditionals. Conditionals are basically if-else statements or your switch statements, if you will. So yeah, the basic syntax is if, and then we provided some condition. So if this condition is specified, execute whatever comes inside this code block. Whatever that comes inside this code block. This is your basic if statement. So I'll repeat once again. You use the if keyword, then specify some condition within the bracket. And if that condition evaluates to true, then in that case, whatever code that you provide inside these curly braces, that gets executed. So as simple as that. Let's take a look at this. We're going to define a variable once again, and let's name it pass, and its value is equal to true. So if pass, then we're going to execute this code block. Print the condition was true. Simple. Now see, we have defined pass to be equal to true. In that case, uh, this condition is going to evaluate to true. This simply means pass equals true. So you don't necessarily have to write double equals true, because like, my bad, uh, use define true with a T capital in Python. Yeah. So you can simply remove this part, because like it is eventually going to alert true, and just run it. As you can see, pass was true, so the condition was true, and this code block got executed, the sprint statement which was inside the curly braces. Now what if we set pass to false? Since it's false, we have already got a warning over here that we need to fix the code so it can be reached, because pass is false, and since it's false, this code block won't get executed. But let's see, let's try to run it. As you can see, pass was false, so it didn't get this code block didn't get executed. Now let's see one more thing. We'll move on to the next kind of conditional statements, which is if else. So if else basically says that if the condition that we provide to if isn't true, then execute the else block. Let me just type it out so you guys will have a better understanding of what I'm trying to say here. We specified a condition to if, which was if pass was equal to false. So this condition evaluates to false. So naturally, what Dart will do is it will not execute the code block inside the if clause, but it will execute the code block within the else clause. So here we are going to print the condition was false. Now, when we are going to run it, as you can see, if condition evaluated to false, so Dart executed the else block, which was the condition was false. Now you can have nested if and else loops, which is if, then some condition, then inside that code block you can have another set of if else. You can just keep nesting if and else blocks according to the logic that you want to uh, build or execute. So yeah, that was one thing. Now the next thing that we're going to see is the switch conditional statement. So switch conditional statement, basically what it does is you just provide a variable to the switch block, to the switch, like the keyword, and then what switch will do is it will have a set of cases. The case, it will evaluate the condition inside the bracket to the cases, and whichever case is the correct one which matches the condition, that will get executed. Sorry if some noise is coming from the background. Yeah, I can't really do something about it. I hope that's fine. So let's take a look at switch. So um, let's set a variable day equals, what's the day today? Friday, right? Friday. Now switch day case. Now this is the first case, and if it's equal to, let's say, Monday, now this code block is going to get executed. All right, this is weird. We're going to print today is Monday and a quick break. Why do we need break? I'll explain it in a bit. Let's just quickly copy it. Just 3 examples will be more than enough. Ishika, can you confirm if there's too much noise from my background?
No, I think it's fine. That's fine. That's fine.
Cool.
Aman, you're on mute. Aman, you're still on mute. Could you please unmute yourself?
Am I audible now?
Yes, you're audible.
Just give me a second.
So if you guys have any questions, you can drop them in the chat and we'll be considering them at the end of the session or maybe in between.
Yeah, it's time to go to sleep. See, we specified day as fry, and then the switch block got executed. So the condition that the thing that we exactly wanted to match, we provided it as day, and so it will evaluate each of these cases against day. So first it compared Monday to day. These aren't equal. Just give me a second.
So Muskan's statement is that break is needed to avoid the fall through in between the cases. So that is exactly how break works. And basically, we need break so that if the condition is not true, then we can move on to the next case. And if none of the condition is satisfied, then we can just go on to the default condition. Moving
Yeah,
on,
yeah,
Aman.
yeah. We'll take a look at why we need break as well. So yeah, first it evaluated Monday and day. So these weren't equal. It went on to the next case. Next case was Tuesday. Again, it didn't match. So it went on to the next case. Next case was Friday. Now Friday and day match because the values are same. So this particular case, this particular code block got executed. Now, since we have a break statement, it didn't fall through, and the switch block got it stopped. It stopped executing. Otherwise, if let's say the break doesn't exist, now let's see what happens. All right. Okay, so this is something interesting. Dart is like stopping this from compilation because this will fall through to the next case. This is something interesting. Yeah. In case of Java, what would have happened is if you would have executed this particular piece of code, this particular statement would have got printed, and after that, the default would have also got printed because there's no break statement over here to stop it from falling through to the next case. So yeah, that's something interesting. So yeah, we have like taken care of conditionals as well. We went through loops. Now the next thing that we are going to take a look at is functions and Dart. So while defining a function, let's take a quick look at what the syntax will be for functions. There's going to be a data type, a return data type, which is basically the data type of the value that this particular function is going to return. um yeah, so it'll have a return type, then the function name, then some arguments that we are going to provide to it, and finally there's going to be a code block, that is whatever logic that the function has, that will go inside the curly braces. So this is how we define a function, and how we call a function is basically we're going to have the name of the function over here. Let's say function name. We're going to provide it the defined arguments. And yeah, this is how we call a function. You'll get a better gist of it as we define a function and look at it by an example. So let's go ahead and define a function. This particular function is going to have a data type of, let's say, string, a return type of string, and the function name is return name. We're going to provide it, let's name it return full name. And this is going to have um, two arguments. The first one will be string first name, and the other one is going to be string last name. The function body is going to be simply return sorry guys, there's a lot of disturbance on my end.
It's fine, Aman. It's fine. That's one drawback of working from home. That is. So that's fine.
Exactly. Yeah, so as you can see in the function body, what it is doing is this is going to return a data type of string. It has two parameters. The first one is first name and the second one is last name. What it is doing is it is returning a string that is comprised of first name and last name, and this is going to be our full name. So to make things more understandable, let's do it like this. Full name, it is going to be equal to this particular string, and we are going to return full name. Full name, like we have specified here, is going to be a string. Now let's call this function. Let's see what happens when we call this function. First of all, we are going to specify two strings here. There are two ways you can specify the string here, like we have seen before as well. First one is string, and it's going to be first name. The other way is just specifying it with var. We don't have to specify, like strictly specify the data type. We can just do var last name. That is going to be equal to Sharma, and that will automatically assume the data type of this particular variable. Now, one thing, there are different naming conventions. The first one is like the camel case. So when it comes to Java and Dart, usually camel case naming conventions are preferred. So it would have been better if I would have defined it as first name rather than first underscore name, which is known as the snake case. Since I'm a Python developer as well, so I prefer using snake case. So that purely depends on your personal preference, whatever you want to use. All right. So now we are going to call this function. We have a var f name. I'm just going to name it f name just to show you guys that you don't have to like name it exactly full name in order to make it work. So f name is going to be return full name, and we're going to provide it first name and last name. And finally, we are going to print f name. Let's see what happens when we run this code. As you can see, the string got concatenated and we have this thing. the full name. So this is how we defined a function and we called the function. Now one more thing, again, var works here as well. If you don't know or you're not sure what data type this particular function is going to return, just do a var over here. Same for the parameters, just do a var. All right, let's just not define a data type at all. Okay, the function cannot have a return type of var. In case you're not sure what data type the function is going to return, just don't specify data type at all. Sorry for the confusion. I hope things are clear. If you have a confusion regarding this, just ask me. Like I said it wrong earlier. If you're not sure what data type the function is going to return, instead of specifying it as var, just omit the return type completely, and Dart will take care of it on its own. Yeah, so we have discussed functions as well. Now, the logic that goes inside the function can be anything. That depends on your use case. Like here we have just combined first name and last name into full name, but you can have more complex logics inside the functions as well. So this is important because like when we actually start writing code in Flutter, when we start writing our applications in Flutter, at that time you'll have to have some complex logic inside your functions. So yeah, anything can go inside the function code block, the logic, but the basics are just are the same. You're going to have a return type. It's not necessary that the function will always return something. For example, let's say return full name would have directly printed the full name. Too much typing, I'm not gonna do that. I'm just gonna print full name. All right, and here as you can see, the name got printed. The function isn't returning anything. Uh, to to show you guys that the function isn't returning anything, I'm gonna print whatever print this function call. So if it would have returned something, we would have got a value over here. For example, printing this prints null, which means this particular function is returning nothing. What I'm saying is if it would have returned something, that particular thing would have got printed. So let's return 5. And now this print is going to print 5. See? So it's not necessary that your function always returns anything. The function can return a null value as well. If it's not returning anything, that means in that case it's returning a null. So that's how you specify nothing in programming languages. Coming to that, we'll be discussing null in Dart, which is another data type that I missed earlier. A very important data type when it comes to Dart. Let's specify a var. It's going to be name and it's equal to null. Let's print this. As you can see, it's null, which basically means var has no value. It has no value at all. It's empty basically. Now there's a thing called null safety in Dart. So when you're writing mobile applications, sometimes you don't want null values to appear inside your code. So Dart provides null safety in its core. Basically, what it means is, I'll give you a quick example. Here, var the name var was null. Let's say we don't want it to be null. So we are going to use the null safety operator var name. Uh, let's for now specify it as Aman, and I'm going to print it here name. Since it's not null, it has a string value. It is going to print Aman. But what if it was null? What if we didn't provide it a value earlier? We just specified the date variable name. If you're going to print it, it is going to return null. But now let's see the null safety operator. Now, what this means is this double question mark. What means is if name is null, if so far name is null, the value 5 will be provided to name. And yeah, if you print it now, it's going to print 5 because here we didn't specify a value for null or for name, and so this particular variable was null. Now we used a null safety check on name, which basically said that if name is null, then provide the value 5 to it. And so the value 5 was provided to name, and we printed the variable 5 was printed. So this is null safety in Dart. One more interesting thing. So uh, there's also a nullable variables in Dart. So how do you specify nullable variables in Dart? Actually, why do we need nullable variables? This is a more complex concept. So in some applications, it might be possible that null values are not allowed, or in some environments, in some dev environments, you won't be able to use null values. So uh, yeah, to specify nullable variables, what you need to do is var, and then you just do a single question mark and name. So this is now a nullable variable. I guess this version of Dart isn't supporting this. This was a relatively new feature, or I might be confused regarding this. So let me take a quick look at it. Um, just give me a second. Meanwhile, if you guys have any questions so far, you can ask them and we'll answer them for sure. All right. Yeah. So this was a mistake that I was making. To define a nullable variable, it has to have a like specified data type. So nullable integer is going to be 42, and so this particular variable, it can be null. Now why do we need this? Earlier, if we would have done non-nullable integer equals null, this could have given us a error. See, this gave us an error. But if we do the same thing with this particular nullable integer, it won't give us an error. because this is nullable. As you can see, this code got executed because this particular variable was nullable. So yeah, this was the concept of uh, nullable variables. The null safety check was double question marks, and for defining nullable variables, we use single question mark. Moving on to the next topic, let me take a quick look at what we are left with. Yeah, lists and maps. This is something you will be using very frequently, not just in Dart or Flutter, in any programming language that you come across. So these are very important complex data types in almost every programming language that you come across. First one is list. So there are two ways to define a list. If you want to define a empty list, what you can do is list, and let's just give it a variable name as L1, new list. So this is how we have defined an empty list. And if you want to define a list with a fixed size, all you need to do is specify a size over here. So this is going to be a fixed size list. Just a second. Um, let's there's one more way to define a list, which is, we have already seen it, var L2, and it is going to be, you can just directly specify some values over here. And list need not just be of integers, it can be of any data type. It can have string values. This is a string list. It can have floating point values as well. You get the point, right? A list can have any data type. I have to check one thing regarding this. Does Dart support heterogeneity within the lists? So let's do a 4. Semicolons once again. Weird. We'll come back to this error later on. Yeah, so Dart supports heterogeneous lists as well. What do I mean by heterogeneous lists? If a list contains just a single data type, in this case, all the objects inside the list are strings. So this is a homogeneous list. And if the data types are different, let's say string, then a floating, then an integer, then a floating point value. So this is a heterogeneous list. And Dart supports both homogeneous and heterogeneous lists. The next thing is how you can add values to the list. Let's define another list here, list 1, and it's going to be equal to 1, 2, and 3. Again, indexing in Dart starts from 0. So the index of 1 here is 0, index of 2 is 1, and 3 is 2. What do I mean by index? Let's take a look at it. Let's say we want to print 3 here from this list. So we'll do list and list 1, and then we'll provide the index of 3. So index of 3 is 0, 1, and 2. So in order to print 2, in order to print 3, we'll do this. As you can see, 3 got printed. Now, we have seen indexing starts from this 0. Let's do one more thing. Let's try to change the value at index 1. So list 1 and the index 1. Let's set the value as 421. I forgot to print it. List 1. Let's just quickly print it and you'll see that the value has been changed at index 1. It's now 421. So this is how you work with the list. You can also add some values at a particular index in a list. So for that, what you'll have to do is list 1. The syntax for that is as follows: the name of the variable, then add, then you have to provide the index and then the value. So this is how you add values to the list. So the index that I'm going to provide here is 1, and the value that I'm going to provide here is let's say what, 68. Was it add at? All right. Okay, it seems that it doesn't let us enter a value, like question a value at a certain index. There's only add and add all functions. So let's take a look at add and add all functions. What it basically does is the add function. It is going to add 68 to the end of this list. Forgot to print it, 1 second. Semicolon. Great. As you can see, 68 has been added to the end of the list. You can also do add all. What add all does is it is going to add all the values that are specified inside this bracket to the end of the list. As you can see, all the values got added. So this is what add and add all do. Yeah, there are a lot of list methods. I'll be, like I said before, I'll be providing some resources that you can go through to have a better grip on Dart. And all these methods, all these list methods will be present inside those resources. So you can go through those resources and you'll have a better understanding of how to play around with lists and do anything that you want. Yeah. So the next topic that we are going to take a look at is maps. So what a map is? Map is basically a pairing of values. So what does this mean? It's a key value pair. There's going to be a key and there's going to be a value. What it means once again is, let's say there's a class, and inside this class, each student has a serial number, and this serial number is basically their identity. Their name is associated with the serial number. So let's say the teacher is taking the attendance, and the teacher is going to call the serial number, and simultaneously like the student is going to speak out the name. So there's a mapping between the serial number and the student name. This is how a map works. It just creates a mapping between one key and its value. So let's take a look at it. Let's see how we can create maps and um, Dart. So like I said, map is going to be a pairing between a key and a value. Let's define a map. Um, to define a map, all you need to do is, first of all, you need to create a map. So in order to create a map, there are two ways. The first one is var, then map1. Just specify the key value pairs like this. It's going to be a mapping between a string and sorry, integer and a string. So the first key that we specified is 1 and the value associated with it is Aman. The next key is going to be 2 and the value associated with it is Ishika. So we have two key value pairs within our map, and let's just print it. Let's just print the value associated with the first key, that is 1. So all we need to do is map 1, then specify the key within these square brackets 1, and printed Aman. So we specified the key and it fetched us the corresponding value, which was Aman. Similarly, if we do a 2 here, which is this key, it's going to print Ishika. So far we don't have a key, let's say 34 inside our map. What happens if we like try to get a value for the key 34? So since we haven't specified a value for the key 34, it is going to be a null, which basically means that there exists no value for this particular key inside a map. All right, so this is how you specify a map, one way to specify a map. Now how do you add key value pairs to a map? This is once again even easier. So earlier there was no key value pair for 34, right? Let's specify a key value pair for 34. This is going to be, just give me a name. Um, what the hell, I can't remember any names.
Dash. Let's put dash.
Dash, okay, yeah, dash. So we have specified the value dash for the key 34. Let's try to print it now. Print map1 34, and this time you'll see dash got printed because we have specified a key value pair. We have added a key value pair to this to this map. So this is how you add values to the map. Very easy stuff, nothing complex. There's one more way you can specify empty maps. So this is going to be map2, and in order to specify empty maps, you just do new and then map. I think that's how it works. Let's check it out. Um, all right, we have this is how it works. Now let's add some values to this map to 1. It's going to be again Aman. Map to 2 is going to be Ishika, and map to 3 is going to be Dash. Now we are going to print. Let's see how we print all the keys inside a map. So for that, all you need to do is map to and then keys. This is going to print all the keys inside this particular map. All right. I think it's an attribute. It's an attribute and not a function. So this just returned a tuple, a set of all the keys inside our map. We can also get the values, I hope, just like this. And it will return all the values inside the map. So yeah, this was a basic example of how maps work in Dart. Now we are going to take a final look, like the final thing inside Dart. This is one of the most important things. This is classes in Dart. So Dart is a object-oriented programming language. Now I won't be going very deep into what objects and classes are. Basically, we're just going to skip right to the code. If you want to go deeper inside object-oriented programming, that's a completely different paradigm, and I'll share some resources for the same. You can go through those resources and you'll get a gist of what object-oriented programming is. But basically, Dart is an object-oriented programming. It has classes. The classes can have objects, and within the class we have like some properties associated with it and some methods or functions associated with the classes. So let's see this object-oriented programming phase of Dart. How do we specify a class? It's very easy. Just use the keyword class, then the class name. Let's keep the class name as Flutter Festival, and uh, day one. Day 1 was in hands on Dart. Mm, Day 2 is going to be Flutter basics. Let's just see up to this point. All right. Uh, Now it is all. These were the two properties or the variables associated with the class. Now this class has a function as well associated with it. This function is basically going to be introduce dash, and it's not going to take any arguments. And this is just going to print dash is the best mascot out there. A simple function, right? Now we have defined a class. This class has two properties or variables associated with it, day 1 and day 2, and a function associated with it, which is introduce dash. Now let's create a class object. This is simply going to be var. I'm going to name it ff flutterfest, and this is going to be new flutter festival. Yeah, we have specified a object of this class. We have instantiated an object of the class. Now let's um, let's access all of these properties and functions of this class. So the first thing that we're going to do is print ff dot day 1. Then we printed ff. Then we are going to print ff day 2, and finally we are going to call this introduce dash function. This isn't returning a data type, so we need not print it. All right, let's see what happens when we run this code. Cool. So the first thing that we did was we defined a class. Now here we created an object of the class, which was ff. Then we accessed the properties of that class, the variables, the class variables. And finally, we accessed one of the class methods, class functions, which was introduced as. So this is how you like define classes and create class objects. There are a few more concepts regarding uh, object-oriented programming in Dart. So one of them is getters and setters, and then getters and setters are basically uh, if you have heard of the term called encapsulation, then you'll understand what getters and setters is. Basically, when you're writing code, when you're working with APIs and stuff, you don't want others to understand or know what the internal implementation of your code is. So in order to direct in instead of like directly allowing them to access day 1 and day 2, you'll have some methods defined, for example var, and not var, this is going to be string get. Okay, I forgot to tell you guys one thing. Final. So the final keyword is used to specify constants inside Dart. Constants are basically variables, not variables, values that are not going to change. So since we have defined day 1 as a constant now, we can't change its value. The code will throw an error in that case. There are two ways to specify constants. The first one is final and the other one is const. So, all right. Okay, yeah. Only static fields can be specified as const. Sorry for this hiccup. Cool. And this is static, so this can't be accessed like this. We'll have to do Flutter festival and then day 2. But let's just remove this for now. And let's just keep it like this. Now, since it's a getter, string get and the function name get first day, and this is going to return this dot day 1. This variable simply allows us to access class properties. So one of the class property was day 1. So this day 1 simply means that the day 1 property of Flutter Festival class.
I'm audible.
Ishika, can you confirm if I'm audible?
Yes, I'm audible.
All right, cool. So yeah, this is our. Is there an error over here? All right, all right, all right. Getters can't have parameter list. Cool. Now what we're going to do is, instead of doing a let's create a getter for day 2 as well. Instead of directly exposing day 1 and day 2, we are going to expose these getter methods. So this is how you specify getters in Dart. Again, you won't understand properly what getters and setters are right now, because this is something that comes into play when you're working with APIs, or when you're like writing more complex code. Right now we just have a single class, so you won't be able to get a better gist of what getters and setters are, but obviously you'll understand this later on. For now, we have just seen how we can specify getters in Dart. To specify setters, you'll have to make you'll have to do just a simple thing. Let me just show you quickly. This is how you specify setters in Dart. You'll be using the set keyword and set first day. It won't be returning anything. It is just going to do there's going to be a value over here. So var uh, agenda, let's specify it as agenda, and this dot day1 is going to be set equal to agenda. So this is how we have specified a setter for a class variable day1. Similarly, we'll specify one for day2 as well. Second day, yeah. Now let's run this code once again. This is weird. Let me quickly check this, why this isn't working. So yeah, this is very common, running into hiccups while you're coding. So the best way to do it is just quickly Google it, and you'll understand what the problem is, and maybe you'll get a fix. So here, I don't think this is going to fix it. If you have any questions, meanwhile, you can ask them.
Aman, we actually do have questions. So we have a question by Khush. Basically, he is
Okay.
asking, ki, what do you mean by final day one is equal to hands on is equal to on Dart?
There's only one equal. So final is basically saying that this is going to be a constant value. You can't change this value later on. Like once you specify day1, if you try to change the value of day1 again, this will fail. Okay, so that's probably the reason why this is failing over here. Let's just remove the final, and hopefully it might work. We'll set it as var. All right, that was a great catch. All right, so Kush, thanks for the save there. Actually, what happened earlier was that I had defined day1 and day2 as constant values, right? Using the final keyword. So final keyword basically means that once you have initialized the variable with a value, you can't change the value once again. So here I had specified day1 and day2 as finals. So that would have meant that I can't change the value once again. Here what I was trying to do was I was trying to specify a setter for day1 and day2, but since those were like constant values, you can't change the value once again. You can't set the value once again, and that's why it was throwing an error. But now I specified it as var, so you can change the value once again, and that's why these setters are working. I'll explain what setters are. See here, let's just take an example of day 1 only to keep things simple. All right. So the first time we print, let's just run this code once. So in both the cases, the value of get first day, which is just the getter for day 1, which means the value of day 1 is right now hands on dart. Now let's set this value to something else. Let's do ff dot set first day, and let's specify the value as having fun with dart. All right. Mhm. Yeah. Now, as you can see, initially the value was the value of first day, that is day 1, was hands on dart, as we have specified over here. But then later on, we changed this value and we set it as having fun with dart. So the next time we printed it, the value got printed as having fun with dart. Right now, getters and setters are a bit confusing, so let's just use day 1 and day 2 itself for better understanding. 1, all right, and this we'll do day 1. Let's print it once again. Now, as you can see, I initialize the value as hands on dart. All right, and then I later on change this value to having fun with dart, and then I printed it once again. So the value was changed because we have specified the variable day 1 as a changeable variable, not a constant variable. Let's do it as final now, and this time the code will throw an error because since it's final, it's constant, it can't be changed. I hope your question was answered. Ishika, any other questions?
So we have one last question. Basically, Aditya is asking if we need anything else to set this up on a Mac.
See, um, to set up like Flutter, like your Flutter dev environment completely, obviously there are certain steps involved in that, and that's a bit complex process, to be very honest. But in order to play around with Dart, in order to just get started with Dart and Flutter, you actually don't need anything. Dartpad can be a very good starter for Flutter and Dart. Right now we are just using Dart, right? But you can like code Flutter as well inside Dartpad. So all you need to do is, let me just show you quickly. Just click on new pad. Right now we are in a Dart pad, but you can use Flutter pad as well. So once you click on this, let me just quickly copy the code in case it disappears. Yeah, just create a Flutter pad, and yeah, now you can write Flutter code over here and it'll run. As you can see, this particular part, all right, it detected that I was coding in Dart, but if you would have seen, there was a UI output over here. So if this, okay, let's run this. This is a completely Flutter pad, and a Flutter application will appear over here when once it runs. It's taking some time. I think it might be my internet. But yeah, this was the whole basic idea of it, that in order to get started with Flutter and Dart, you don't need a setup. You can just use dartpad.dev and you'll get everything over here. Let's get back to our code once again. So we have seen a basic example of how we can create class, then we can create getters and setters over here. There are more concepts involving like object oriented programming, so that will be inheritance and things like that. Inheritance is an important concept. I'll just quickly show you with the help of the Flutter code only. So here you see class myapp extends stateless widget. So right now you won't understand what stateless widget is, but basically what this particular line of code means is that this my app is inheriting from the stateless widget, which means whatever properties and functions that the stateless widget has, the my app class will also get and inherit all those properties. So it simply means that this my app is basically a child of the stateless widget class. So this is like overview of what inheritance is. There are a few more concepts involving like in the object oriented programming paradigm. So I'll be sharing some resources for the same. You can go through those resources and you'll get a better understanding of that. So yeah, this was a basic overview of the Dart programming language. It's a very easy to learn programming language, and the best reason why I'll tell you that Dart it's worthwhile investing your time in Dart is because Flutter is completely written. Flutter, the like we discussed earlier, Flutter is a uh, framework that can be used for developing cross platform development, and it can be used for developing native apps for almost all the uh, platforms using a single code base. So Flutter is actually written in Dart, and whatever code that you're going to write in your Flutter applications, that is going to be Dart in Dart. So yeah, uh, that's one of the main reasons why I think that investing your time in learning Dart is worthwhile. Right now, Flutter is booming a lot. Like it is slowly overtaking all the other app development programming languages and frameworks. It's most of the startups right now are shifting their code bases to Flutter because one advantage that Flutter provides is you can simultaneously develop apps for both Android and iOS, which saves a lot of time and it's very fast paced. So yeah, uh, that's one of the advantages of learning Flutter and Dart. Uh, I guess this was all from my side for this session. From tomorrow on, it's going to get a bit more interesting. We'll start working around on our mobile application. We'll start creating an actual mobile application that you can probably showcase on your project board or maybe resume or something like that. So yeah,
Okay,
Ishika, would you like to
so
take on?
this is all. Yes,
Yeah.
definitely. So this is all for today's session. The attendance form is given in the chat box. The registration for the next session is also given in the chat box. So if you attend all of the 5 sessions, you will be receiving a certificate from our end. And obviously, by the end of 5 sessions, as Zaman mentioned right now, we will be building a project. So that is the agenda. And if you have any queries, you can put it on a Discord channel as well. And the link for the same is also given in the chat box. And you can also find the resources for the same. So thank you everyone for joining. And we'll end the session. Thank you.
Bye, everyone. Have a great day.